Alright, you know I like CZ's World videos when he talks about all these horror movies, but this one's a little different. This one is called, horror movies you didn't know were based on true stories. Now, when it comes to that, I know that Texas Chainsaw Massacre was influenced. Not technically a true story, but influenced based off a true story. I think it was Ed Gein, right? Ed Gein, that movie they made, that TV show on Netflix, I think it was based off of him, right? I think. But I know Texas Chainsaw Massacre was influenced by a real story. To be real, I think that's it. Strangers, you can see it being a true story. Like, we've heard of stories like it, obviously, with the embellishment of what the movie shows. Scream, you can, in a way, embellish it, but say it's influence. But I'm interested in seeing, this is a almost 30-minute video, so there's a lot of different stories, and Ghostface was on the thumbnail. So I'm interested in seeing his breakdown of it, because I know it was that much to make a 30-minute video, so let's get right into it. I'll put his original video in the description below.
Horror movies are supposed to be a safe thrill. You turn off the lights, you get scared, and when the credits roll, you tell yourself that it's just a movie. Horror movies are supposed to...
Look at his right side when he does the snap. Look where CZ's at.
To be a safe thrill. You turn off the lights, you get scared, and when the credits roll, you tell yourself that it's just a movie. But what if it isn't? What if that thing creeping across the screen or hiding in the shadows actually happened? They say all fiction comes from a place of reality, and horror is not immune to that. Sometimes it's ripped straight from the headlines, an urban legend, or an unsolved mystery. In this video, we're looking at some of the most iconic horror films that took inspiration from
I heard of something about that. I can't remember what fully.
They take something familiar and safe, a family home, a vacation, even a phone call, and twist it into something sinister. Is it scarier when you know the truth or when you don't? If you want to know the true stories behind Scream, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and other highly esteemed horror films, stick around to the end of this video.
Interesting. Nightmare on Elm Street? Obviously, it's going to be loosely based, but still. Orphan.
The film follows John and Kate Coleman, a married couple still grieving the loss of their unborn child, as they decided to adopt a 9-year-old girl named Esther from a local orphanage. Esther is polite, well-mannered, and a talented pianist, the kind of child any parent would be lucky to have. But it doesn't take long for Kate to sense that something about Esther isn't right. Strange accidents begin to occur, people get hurt, and Kate starts to suspect the sweet little girl they welcomed into their home is hiding something dangerous. The truth, revealed in the film's infamous third-act twist, is that Esther isn't a child at all, but a 33-year-old woman with a rare hormonal disorder to make it look like she was prepubescent. She has a history of posing as a child, infiltrating families, and leaving a trail of violence behind her.
She disappeared a year ago, and we lost track of her. If it's really Nina, you don't have much time.
It's a shocking reveal, and one that made the movie stand out from other killer kid thrillers. But while Orphan might seem like a work of pure fiction, its central premise, an adult masquerading as a child to manipulate and harm others, has an unsettling real-world precedent. The original story seems to be inspired by a true crime chronicle known as the Kuzum case, which took place in the small town of Kuzum, Czech Republic in 2007. Czech Republic, or as it's now known, Czechia, has got to be one of the most well-titled nations in the entire world. At the center of it was a shadowy religious cult called the Grail Movement, a group with strict, almost apocalyptic beliefs. 3 women connected to the cult carried out a campaign of psychological and physical abuse against children, aiming to break their spirits and make them obedient servants for their warped religious purposes. One of the women behind the cult was 33-year-old Barbora Skrlova, who was a classical composer and had a rare glandular disease that made her look like a child. This detail may have directly influenced Orphan's Lena, a talented pianist, also 33 in the film's backstory, but still able to pass as a child. 2 of the women, Klada Mawarova and her sister, Katerina Mawarova, were eventually caught when a neighbor's baby monitor picked up footage of the torture scene and called police. Klada was using the baby monitor so that she could watch from the other room. Police rescued 2 boys, aged 9 and 7, and 1 girl, 13-year-old Anichka Mawarova, from the house. The girl claimed to be Klada's daughter, and she was placed in a youth care facility. But shortly after, Anichka ran away from the facility that she'd been placed in and sent a letter to the Czech police, claiming that her mom had not actually tortured them. Eventually, after the investigators dug deeper, it was discovered that Anichka didn't actually exist. This was a false identity that the women had created for Barbora. She had been posing as a 13-year-old to get out of charges being filed whenever she got in trouble with the law, which apparently was quite often. She used the Anichka persona to confuse and manipulate the young boys being tortured. Investigators later concluded that Barbora wasn't just hiding behind the Anichka persona, she was the manipulative force driving the abuse. As a central figure in the Grail movement, she convinced Klada and Katerina that the boys were possessed by evil spirits and needed to be punished. Barbora staged incidents to make it seem like the children were misbehaving, then later forced them to write letters confessing their sins. It was Barbara that persuaded the sisters to carry out the abuse. After the sisters were arrested, Barbara managed to flee to Norway, where she assumed the identity of Adam Pfizer, a 13-year-old Czech boy who had gone missing. Incredibly, she managed to enroll in school under the new identity, fooling staff and classmates alike. When she later vanished again, police launched a nationwide search for the missing Adam, only to discover that Adam was in fact Barbara. She was eventually found in Tromsø, arrested, and deported back to the Czech Republic. In 2008, Barbara stood trial and was convicted for her role in the Kujum case. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison, though she only served part of that term before being released under probation. Makes me wonder if she made friends with one of the guards.
I want to do something nice for you. You can come in.
It's not hard to see the DNA of Orphan in this case.
That stuff
the use of a childlike
creepy,
appearance as both a disguise and a weapon, the calculated emotional manipulation, and someone dangerous hiding in plain sight. In Orphan, Lena doesn't just pose as a child, she uses that position to manipulate the family from the inside out. She recruits her younger adoptive sibling to do her bidding, from convincing her deaf sister to lip read a phone call to covering up a murder. The parallels don't stop there. In both the real and fictional stories, the supposed child manipulates the adults in the situation. Lena engineers arguments between her adoptive parents, creating a divide between them, while Barbara manipulated sisters Clara and Katarina into acts of abuse. And of course, there's the repeated reinvention of identity. Just as Barbara slipped into the roles of Anichka and later Adam, Lena moves from family to family and country to country under different identities. Orphan released in 2009, but just a few years later, the movie itself seemed to inspire another true crime case.
Dude, this stuff is real. It's still baffling. He's saying all that. I'm like, this is not a movie. That's real life. People. Wow. As much as like I'm 34 years old, I've heard some crazy stuff. I still get amazed at like, and not in a good way, like, oh, that's so cool, but like in a shock, creeped way of how this stuff is real. Like these weirdos out here. Bro, be careful. Be very careful out there. The fact that's real, bro.
Natalia Grace.
Even the whole story before the criminal there, of that cult and all that. It's like, I've never heard of that before.
Allegedly born in Ukraine in 2003. She was born with a rare bone growth disorder, and so she was adopted by an American couple, Michael and Christine Barnett, in 2010 when she was just 7 years old. But just 2 years later, they claimed that Natalia was actually older than she was claiming to be, and petitioned to have her age legally changed from 9 to 22, then abandoned her. They moved to Canada, leaving Natalia alone in their Indiana apartment. They were later put on trial for neglect of a dependent, and the Barnetts claimed that she was trying to hide the fact that she was an adult in an attempt to ruin their lives. However, there appears to be evidence that Natalia really was born in 2003, and she really was left alone at just 9 years old. According to In Touch Weekly, investigators visited Ukraine to find Natalia Grace's biological mother, Anna Volodymyrivna Gava, in 2019. A DNA test determined that Anna and Natalia were a 99.999% match. The biological mother would have been 10 years old in 1989, making it very unlikely that she could have given birth to Natalia yet. Most girls don't start ovulating until they're 12 years old. There are also birth and hospital records from 2003 that support Natalia's original age. In 2010, she was examined by an endocrinologist who estimated her age to be 9 to 11 years old. And dental records from 2011 show that she still had 12 baby teeth. But even with all of that, the adopting couple was exonerated due to what, in my opinion, appears to be a strange technicality. As Ron Wilkins of the Lafayette Journal and Courier wrote, the judge's August 14 ruling is that Tippecanoe Superior Court cannot alter another state superior court, so Natalia's age is a settled matter in courts. So from my understanding, because her age was changed in Marion County, Indiana, and the alleged child neglect took place in Tippecanoe County, Indiana, the Tippecanoe County Court cannot challenge the ruling on her age, even if there's evidence to suggest that Natalia was born in 2003. Many people believe that the Barnett couple was inspired by the character of Lena Klammer from the Orphan movie, and thought that they could use a similar story to get rid of their responsibility to take care of a child with medical issues. Their claims of psychotic behavior in Natalia line up with the details of Lena's life that we've gone over in this video. But Natalia's new family, the Mans family, hasn't seen any evidence of her being psychotic. Obviously, it's impossible to read the minds of Michael and Christine Barnett, so we'll probably never know the true reason why they wanted to adopt and get rid of
crazy that happened with the new family.
The real-life stories of Orphan's central antagonist shows how sometimes the horror can come within the safety of our own homes, whether that's from the people we invite into them, or worse still, from our own family. But our next story somehow hits even closer to home, attacking the safety and sanctity of our own beds. Enter the world of Freddy Krueger,
Yeah, I gotta hear this
one. Hides a history rooted in very real terror.
Now they're talking about the story of Freddy Krueger before he transformed.
I think everyone knows the story of Nightmare on Elm Street.
Then I've heard of
about a group of teenagers stalked in their dreams by Freddy Krueger, a burned, claw-handed killer who can turn your nightmares into his own personal hunting ground. When you fall asleep, you're on his turf, and whatever happens to you there also happens in the real world. As the teens of a town called Springwood would find out when their friends start dropping dead in the night.
Look at us. We're dropping off like flies here.
It's a terrifying hook, one that made writer-director Wes Craven's 1984 film an instant classic and spawned one of horror's most iconic villains. But Freddy's origin is more than just supernatural fantasy. Behind the dream-stalking killer was a real medical mystery, a phenomenon where people died in their sleep without any clear cause. These weren't random cases either. They were clustered.
Make sure I heard that right.
And is more than just supernatural fantasy. Behind the dream-stalking killer was a real medical mystery, a phenomenon where people died in their sleep without any clear cause. These weren't random cases either. They were clustered in a very specific community, just like in the movie, and the pattern was disturbing enough to make headlines. To an outsider, these unexplained deaths might have been written off as cases of SUNS, sudden unexpected nocturnal death syndrome. First documented in the early 1980s, SUNS was observed primarily among young Southeast Asian men, many of them refugees from Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam.
So are you Chinese or Japanese?
The victims were usually healthy men in their 20s and 30s with no clear medical issues, yet they would simply die in their sleep. Medical researchers struggled to explain it. Some suspected an undiagnosed heart condition. Others thought that stress and trauma might be triggering fatal arrhythmias. But within the Southeast Asian community, there was a far older explanation. Something was following them from their dreams into the waking world. Wes Craven first read about one such case in the Los Angeles Times. It was the early 1980s, and the article described a young Cambodian refugee, a boy who had survived the horrors of the communist regime, Khmer Rouge, and escaped to the United States. But once here, he became plagued by intense nightmares. He told his parents that if he fell asleep, something would kill him. Still, they urged him to sleep, even attempting to give him sleeping pills.
Wow.
Instead, he stayed awake for days at a time, drinking coffee through the night. Eventually, sheer exhaustion caught up with him, and he finally went to sleep. But in the middle of the night, his parents heard screams from his bedroom. By the time they reached him, he was dead. The cause was undetermined. In his room, police found a small coffee maker tucked away in the closet and a stash of uneaten sleeping pills. For Craven, this story was fascinating. He said in an interview with Vulture that the boy's determination to stay awake and the fact that his nightmares seemed to kill him became a seed for a Nightmare on Elm Street. Craven fused this real-world mystery with the image of a dream-invading killer, drawing on his own childhood memories of a frightening stranger in a fedora who once caught him staring and returned the glare with an expression he never forgot. The result was Freddy Krueger, a figure who could cross the threshold between dreams and reality, where death in one meant death in the other. The boy's story closely echoes what we see later in the film. In A Nightmare on Elm Street, Nancy Thompson, while trying to avoid Freddy Krueger, uses the same methods to fight off sleep. She hides a coffee machine in her room and takes stay-awake, fast-acting pills in an effort to stay up and stay alive. The real boy's desperate attempts to outrun his nightmares are mirrored almost beat for beat in Nancy's own struggle, making the line between fact and fiction razor thin. While the phenomenon was most visible in the 1980s, SUNS hasn't disappeared. Sporadic cases are still reported, particularly in Southeast Asian communities. Many researchers now connect it to Brugada syndrome, a hereditary heart condition that can cause sudden fatal arrhythmias during sleep. The condition remains rare, but the fact that it still claims lives gives an eerie weight to Craven's inspiration. Freddy, the dream demon, may be fictional, but the fear of going to sleep and never waking up was, and still is, very real for some. But while A Nightmare on Elm Street took the safety of sleep and made it unsafe, not all nightmares wait for snores before they strike. My next example might just crawl right out of your TV and into the waking world.
Really?
That's where we cross from Elm Street to Japan, and to one of horror's most haunting figures, Sadako Yamamura.
Oh, I gotta hear this one. After being surprised with the Freddy thing. I love this channel, yo. The stuff he be breaking down is interesting. The Ring, I got it. Oh,
in
wow.
Ringu, a Tokyo journalist named Reiko Asakawa investigates an urban legend about a cursed videotape. Supposedly, anyone who watches it receives a phone call and dies exactly 7 days later. When Reiko watches the tape herself, she unwittingly starts the countdown. Her race to uncover the tape's origins leads her to learn all about Sadako, a psychic young woman whose violent death left behind a curse on anyone who watches her corrupted videotape. Her curse propagates like a virus, ensuring Sadako's rage spreads far beyond the bottom of the well where her story began. Sadako's powers are not randomly assigned though. She's the daughter of Shizuku Yamamura, a powerful psychic who gained notoriety in Japan for her abilities, and Heihachiro Ikuma, a professor who exploited Shizuko for his own research. marriage. When Shizuko was later branded a fraud and ridiculed by the press after a public demonstration that failed, the scandal cast a shadow over the Yamamoto family. Sadako inherited her mother's psychic gifts, but also the stigma and trauma that came with them. The legend aspect of Sadako's story is incredibly similar, in fact almost identical, to the Japanese folktale called Bancho Sarayashiki. But the character herself was no tall tale, so let's talk about her real-world counterpart. Koji Suzuki, the author of Ring, based his characters, the mother and daughter Shizuko and Sadako, on the real-life stories of Chizuko Mifune and Takahashi Sadako. The real-life Chizuko Mifune was born June 17, 1886 in Kumamoto Prefecture. She went on to marry a lieutenant colonel when she was 22. However, the marriage would eventually break down after she was accused by her in-laws of stealing and hiding some money. According to an article in the lineup, Chizuko's husband had misplaced 50 yen, or about $3,400 USD in 2025, and Chizuko had predicted the money was in the drawer of a Buddhist altar that her in-laws used. Chizuko's brother-in-law, believing her to have psychic abilities, decided to help train her and strengthen her powers. Just like the fictional Shizuko, Chizuko's abilities caught the attention of an assistant professor of psychology called Tomokichi Fukurai, who had an interest in the supernatural and wanted to prove the existence of ESP. Just like his fictional counterpart, Ikuma, Fukurai made Chizuko the subject of his research, with the pair conducting multiple experiments. Then, in April 1910, Professor Fukurai organized a public demonstration of Chizuko's powers. We can only assume this first display was a success, because on September 15, 1910, a second demonstration was held by Tokyo University President Baron Yamakawa Kenjiro. During the demonstration, Chizuko would read messages written and sealed inside of envelopes. But just like Ring, this public show didn't go well. It was apparently revealed that the messages inside the envelopes were not the ones written by the university president, but were in fact written by Professor Fukurai. The pair were labeled as frauds by the press, and again, like her fictional counterpart, Chizuko struggled with the public criticism and died the following year due to mental struggles. Unlike Chizuko, there isn't really a lot of information about Takahashi Sadako aside from her being born in 1868 in Okayama Prefecture. But like her namesake, Takahashi Sadako apparently had the gift of psychic photography, also known in Japanese as nensha. She was rumored to have imprinted some Chinese characters onto film with her mind. Though the two were not related by blood in real life, they were both studied by the paranormal investigator Fukurai and served as notable cases of psychic abilities in the news, which probably inspired the author, Koji Suzuki, to question what appeared to be supernatural phenomena and attempt to explain it through a series of books. Not only were Chizuko Mifune and Takahashi Sadako the clear inspirations for Koji Suzuki's characters Shizuko and Sadako in the books, director Hideo Nakata also cited them as the influence behind the distorted, smudged images seen on the faces of the victims in the cursed videotape in the 1998 movie adaptation Ringu. What made Sadako scary was her supernatural abilities, powers that defied the laws of science. Her curse spread like a viral infection, an unstoppable chain reaction where every victim became the next link. The books also reflected contemporary fears of evolving technology, making a commentary about our ever-changing tech landscape. It's not the only example on this list to make a commentary on real-world issues using a horror movie killer, but my next example does so in a much more meta-cinematic fashion. I am, of course, referring to the self-aware 90s slasher, Scream.
Man, dude, wow.
Released in 1996, Scream begins with a now iconic phone call to high school student Casey Becker, asking her about her favorite scary movies before brutally giving her the knife.
You like scary movies?
I can believe the Scream stuff. I was still thinking about The Ring, what he was saying about that.
From there, a masked killer known as Ghostface starts targeting teenagers in the small town of Woodsboro, California. Our main character, Sydney Prescott, is still reeling from the murder of her mother a year earlier, and soon finds herself at the center of the killer's game. But Scream isn't just a slasher, it's a slasher that knows it's a slasher. Characters openly reference horror movie rules, like how you should never drink, do it, or say I'll be right back, even as they're picked off one by one. The film plays with genre cliches while still delivering brutal moments, sharp twists, and a killer reveal that shocked audiences. The Ghostface persona itself was mostly fictional. The mask is actually just a novelty Halloween mask by a company called Fun World as a part of their Fantastic Faces series. Here on this channel, we love countries that start with CZ and companies that end with World. The mask loosely resembles the famous Edvard Munch painting The Scream, but the backstory I'm here to talk about is much more chilling than a Halloween mask. The seeds of Scream's premise were planted in the real-life terror of the Gainesville Ripper, a murderer whose brutal, calculated attacks on college students in 1990 horrified Florida and captured national attention. In the summer of 1990, the quiet college town of Gainesville, Florida was about to be consumed by fear. Over the course of 4 days, from August 24th to August 27th, a series of brutal murders would grip the nation, carried out by a 36-year-old drifter named Danny Rowling.
Early this morning, police discovered the bodies of 2 University of Florida students at this off-campus apartment building.
On August 24th, dressed in black and armed with duct tape and a combat knife, Rowling slipped into the apartment of University of Florida freshmen Sonia Larson and Christina Powell. After breaking into the girl's apartment, Danny Rolling found Christina Powell asleep on the couch downstairs, but passed her by, heading upstairs to where he bound and gagged Sonia. Then, returning to the living room, he assaulted and finished Christina before going back upstairs to do the same to Sonia. The following day, on August 25th, Danny Rolling entered the home of Christina Hoyt, another college student. Finding her place empty, he positioned himself and waited for her to return. The attack mirrored the first. He bound her with duct tape, violated, and
These are a lot of stories.
The final attack happened on August 27th, when Rolling entered the apartment of Tracy Pauls and Manny Tavola. This time he encountered resistance, as Rolling was surprised to find a man in the apartment. Manny fought back, but Rolling eventually overpowered and killed him. He then turned his attention to Tracy, assaulting and taking her life. At all three locations, Rolling had taken the time to attempt to clean the scene. He used dish soap and wet towels to try to remove any evidence of his being there. But despite his attempts to be careful, he ended up leaving duct tape and his knife at the third scene. Which seems weird that he would take the time to try to clean up evidence, but then leave behind very important evidence. Maybe he didn't realize they could be traced back.
He ate too bright.
By now, bodies of the first three victims had been discovered, with bodies of Tracy and Manny being discovered later on the 27th. The murders gripped Gainesville in a panic. Some students began sleeping in groups while others fled back home. A curfew was imposed, with the university eventually closing.
Some students, now afraid to live alone, have moved in with others. Fearing the danger is too great,
I would have moved away.
Kevin Williamson first encountered the Gainesville Ripper case in 1994 when he was still a struggling actor and screenwriter. One night, while house-sitting, he tuned into an episode of Turning Point. The episode covered Danny Rolling's spree in Gainesville. It wasn't so much the crimes themselves that unnerved him. It was watching a story about a killer who could slip into an ordinary home while he was alone in someone else's home. That creeping fear, the sudden realization that danger could already be inside with you, planted the seed for Scream. As Williamson would later put it in an interview, "I was being scared out of my mind. During the commercial break, I heard a noise, and I had to go search the house. And I went into the living room, and a window was open. I'd been in this house for 2 days. I'd never noticed the window open. So I got really scared. So I went to the kitchen, got a butcher knife, got on the phone, and I called a buddy of mine." While it is true that the crimes of Rolling inspired the Ghostface Killer, the dressing in black, and the use of a combat or hunting knife, Rolling's crimes went far beyond slasher theatrics. His attacks included SA and the deliberate degradation of his victims, acts that were absent from Ghostface's calculated taunting and phone call mind games. I know the film came out in 1996, but just a spoiler warning going forward, I will be talking about the identity of Ghostface. If you haven't seen it, feel free to skip this chapter, pause right now and watch Scream, or cut out your ears and eyeballs.
Classic.
During the Gainesville investigation, rumors spread that there might be 2 killers at work. The murders happened in quick succession and with such precision that police and locals wondered if Rolling had an accomplice.
We have every reason to believe now that all of the 5 victims found are probably all connected to one suspect or 2 suspects.
That speculation turned out to be false, but the fear of multiple murderers prowling a college town added another layer of terror to the case. It's a detail that Scream would later make literal. Ghostface isn't just one killer, but 2 working in tandem, Billy Loomis and Stu Macher. Their dual identity lets them confuse their victims and carry out attacks that would seem impossible for one person. Rolling was eventually arrested on September 7th in Florida after an armed supermarket robbery led him to crashing his vehicle during a high-speed chase. Police later learned that he was already wanted in the state of Louisiana for the attempted murder of his father. Rolling grew up under an abusive father, a police officer who beat and humiliated his family. Rolling later admitted that he wanted to be remembered, to achieve the infamy of serial killers who came before. That fractured relationship with his father is echoed in Scream's killer. Billy Loomis's rage is rooted in his own family trauma, blaming Sidney's mother for destroying his parents' marriage.
She's the reason my mom moved out and abandoned me.
While Stu seems to only tag along for the thrill, together they essentially do what Rolling did, turn murder into a performance. Where Rolling posed as victims, Billy and Stu scripted their killings like a movie. The hallmarks of Rolling's crimes, a killer in black breaking into homes, targeting students, curfews, and a community gripped by fear, all made their way into Scream's blueprint, even down to the killer having daddy issues. But the mutilations and gender-specific assaults were left out. Maybe for the better. It's hard to say how that would have gone tonally alongside the meta-commentary aspects of Scream that focus on the tropes of other slasher movies and sometimes go into somewhat silly territory. While Scream put the horror in everyday, small-town life, Final Destination took that fear on the road, in the air, to the tracks, basically anywhere really. Anywhere where transportation vehicles exist, and also a tower one time. The franchise taps into a primal everyday fear we carry, whether we acknowledge it or not, the inevitability of death. A routine plane trip, drive down the freeway, even a casual day at an amusement park. Any of these moments could be your last. In each Final Destination film, a character has a psychic premonition about an impending disaster, allowing that character and several others to cheat death. But as time goes on, death finds them in unexpected and inventive ways. The idea is that you can never escape death, and if you do, it's only a matter of time before death catches up with you. It's a unique idea for a horror series, but could it be true in our world as well? Surely a literal Grim Reaper thing hunting down people can't be based on real life events. It all began with a woman vacationing in Hawaii in the late 1980s who received a call from her mother, warning her not to get on her flight back the next day, stating that she had a bad feeling about it. Personally, I would also have a bad feeling that the airline was going to charge me $300 to change my flight, but in this case, superstition won out. The girl took her mother's advice and changed flights.
Yeah,
when she arrived
I'm that kind of person. You call me and be like, hey, I have a bad feeling about it. No problem. I'll go in debt. I don't care. I'm not going on that flight. For you to call me and let me know, like, hey, bro, don't take this flight. No problem. No problem. I'll see you soon.
Learned that her initial flight had crashed, and her mother's apparent premonition had possibly saved her life.
That's crazy.
This was the story that screenwriter Jeffrey Reddick read in a magazine, which became the alleged inspiration for Flight 180, a rejected spec script for the 90s sci-fi series The X-Files, which he eventually reworked into Final Destination. But the crash that Jeffrey Reddick claimed as the inspiration for his script is missing one aspect that some of the others are not missing. And that's the part where death continues to come after the survivor. He's never spelled out which specific crash his story is based on, but it's most likely Aloha Airlines Flight 243, which went down in April 1988 on the way from Hilo to Honolulu. Passengers witnessed the roof rupture, and 23 minutes in, it was torn off the plane. One flight attendant was swept out of the vehicle, but that was the only fatality. No airline customers lost their lives. If this was the flight that Reddick read about, the woman who changed her travel plans did not actually cheat death. However, the true inspiration for the movie is disputed. There are many who say it's actually based on TWA Flight 800. TWA Flight 800 lines up with that pretty closely. It's a flight from New York City to Paris. It left in the evening, and 12 minutes after takeoff, it exploded and crashed into the Atlantic Ocean, leaving no survivors of the 230 passengers. Of those whose lives were lost, 16 students and 5 chaperones from a Pennsylvania high school French class were on board. It's pretty clear that at least the circumstances of Voulez Flight 180 and Final Destination were inspired by the crash of TWA Flight 800 in 1996, even if screenwriter Jeffrey Reddick insists otherwise. When the film came out, Roger Ebert even criticized it for exploiting a real tragedy for a campy horror premise. Reddick pushed back in an interview with Bloody Disgusting, saying, when the movie came out in 2000, a lot of reviewers said the story was inspired by the real-life crash of TWA Flight 800 in 1996. I got flack for that, but I actually wrote this in 1994. When Reddick says 1994, he's referring to his original X-Files spec script, where Dana Scully's younger brother had the premonition on a Newark to Boston flight. By the time New Line bought the idea in 1997, the script had morphed into a story about a French class trip to Paris, similar to the doomed JFK to Paris flight of TWA 800 the year before. Whether intentional or not, the parallels are hard to ignore. As for why the characters became teens, Reddick told Consequence.net that teenagers were hot again in horror films. New Line wanted to make them all teenagers. Scream had just blown up the box office the previous year, and studios were chasing the teen horror films. I don't necessarily think that just because a horror film is inspired by true events, that makes it in bad taste. All fiction comes from a place of reality. The Final Destination franchise has plenty more eerie parallels to the real world. Heck, there was even a screening of Final Destination Bloodlines where a chunk of the roof fell down on an audience member. I have a whole video on how Final Destination-esque disasters keep coming true in real life. It's kinda crazy. You can find that video on the left. And check out my new channel, Pump.
Wow. Okay. Shout out to him. The way he be researching this stuff. That one with the ring and Nightmare on Elm Street, that threw me in for a loop, bro. I'm like, for real? And the creepiest one was the first one when it came to the Orphan movie. That stuff, bro. It's just crazy to think like that's real life. But hey, shout out to him. I love his breakdowns on these. Go check out his channel, especially if you're a horror fan. But yeah. Anyway, let me know what you think about all this. I'll see you later.